Have you ever wondered what happens in hospitals when the clock strikes midnight? When the patients are asleep and the corridors are bathed in dim, eerie light? Hospitals are places of healing, but they're also places where life and death intertwine, leaving behind more than just memories. I didn't believe in ghosts or the paranormal until I worked the night shift as a nurse. What happened on one unforgettable shift changed everything I thought I knew. Stay with me until the end, because this story might make you question what really happens when the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. I had just started working as a night shift nurse in a small hospital. It wasn't the bustling kind of place you see on TV. Most nights were quiet, with just a handful of patients and a skeleton crew of staff. The quietness was eerie, but I liked the solitude. It gave me time to catch up on charts and enjoy a cup of coffee without constant interruptions. That night felt different from the moment I walked in. There was an odd heaviness in the air, like the building itself was holding its breath. I chalked it up to exhaustion. It had been a long week, and I wasn't sleeping well. My shift started at 11 p.m., and as usual, I went to check on my assigned patients. Most of them were stable, recovering from surgeries or under observation. But room 206 was an exception. It housed an elderly woman named Mrs. Gardner, a terminal cancer patient who had been in and out of consciousness for days. Her prognosis was grim, but she held on, her frail body refusing to give up. I'd spoken to her family earlier in the week, and they'd said their goodbyes. It was just a matter of time. Around 1 a.m., I was reviewing some charts at the nurses' station when I noticed the light outside room 206 flicker. It was brief, just a quick flutter, but enough to catch my attention. I glanced up, but everything seemed normal. Still, I decided to check on Mrs. Gardner. When I entered her room, she was awake, her eyes wide and fixed on the ceiling. She looked terrified, her frail hands clutching the blanket. I rushed to her side, thinking she was in pain. "Mrs. Gardner, are you okay?" I asked softly. "They're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Who's here?" I asked, glancing around the empty room. She didn't answer, just kept staring at the ceiling, her breathing shallow and uneven. I checked her vitals, stable, nothing out of the ordinary. But the fear in her eyes was real, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "Don't let them take me," she said suddenly, gripping my hand with surprising strength. Her words chilled me. I tried to reassure her, but she wouldn't let go, her frail fingers digging into my skin. Finally, she closed her eyes and drifted off, leaving me shaken. I left her room, my heart pounding, and returned to the nurse's station. As I sat down, I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like I was being watched. The hallway was empty, bathed in the soft glow of fluorescent lights. But as I stared, I saw it, a shadow, darker than the dim light should allow, moving at the far end of the corridor. At first, I thought it was another nurse, but there was something unnatural about it. It didn't walk, it glided, soundless and smooth, disappearing into the wall near room 206. My stomach knotted, and I told myself it was just my imagination. Maybe the lack of sleep was getting to me. But deep down, I knew what I saw. At around 3 a.m., I decided to take a break and grab a coffee. The elevator was just a short walk from the nurse's station. When I pressed the button, the doors opened immediately, and I stepped inside. The ride was uneventful until I felt the temperature drop. It wasn't just cool, it was freezing, the kind of cold that makes your breath fog. The elevator stopped on the second floor, even though I hadn't pressed the button. The doors slid open to reveal a dark, empty corridor. No one was there. I hit the button for the first floor again, my hands trembling. As the doors began to close, I swear I saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway. A pale, translucent shape that vanished as quickly as it appeared. I didn't get my coffee that night. When I returned to my station, the feeling of unease had grown into full-blown dread. The monitors were beeping steadily, and everything seemed normal. But then at 4:15 a.m., the call light for room 206 blinked on. I rushed to Mrs. Gardner's room, expecting to find her awake or needing assistance. Instead, she was lying still, her face pale and serene. Her chest no longer rose and fell, and the heart monitor showed a flat line. She was gone, but that wasn't the worst part. As I stood there, a chill enveloped the room, and the lights flickered again. I felt a presence behind me, an oppressive weight that made it hard to breathe. I turned slowly, and in the dim light I saw them. Shadowy figures standing in the corners of the room, their forms barely distinguishable from the darkness. They didn't move, didn't speak, but I felt their intent. They were waiting for her. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the bed, and bolted from the room. When I returned with another nurse moments later, the shadows were gone and the room was still. We pronounced Mrs. Gardner dead, and I tried to act as if nothing had happened. But the memory of those figures stayed with me, etched into my mind. The rest of the shift passed uneventfully, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd witnessed something beyond explanation. When the morning shift arrived, I handed off my patients and left the hospital, the rising sun doing little to dispel the lingering fear. I later learned that room 206 had a reputation among the staff. Patients often reported seeing shadows or feeling a presence in the room. Some even claimed to hear whispers at night. Most of the nurses avoided it whenever possible, but no one could explain why. It was just another mystery, one of many in the hospital's long history. I still work as a nurse, but I've never taken another night shift. The darkness of those hours feels alive in a way I can't explain, and I've learned to trust my instincts. Hospitals are places of healing, but they're also places where the line between life and death blurs, and sometimes things slip through. So, the next time you find yourself in a hospital late at night, pay attention. Listen to the whispers, watch the shadows, and trust your gut. Because sometimes, what we can't see is more real than we'd like to believe. And sometimes it's watching us.